All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are taking a completely data-driven, highly analytical approach to one of history's absolute greatest puzzles, the Phaistos Disk. You know, for well over a century, this little clay artifact has just baffled everyone. Historians, linguists, code breakers, they've literally tried everything. But today, we're stripping away all that guesswork. We're looking at a sleek, highly structured, and entirely falsifiable solution. No myths, no wild out there guesses, just clear procedural logic. So if you're ready for a total paradigm shift in how we look at ancient data, you are absolutely in the right place. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the mystery itself, introduce a really groundbreaking procedural code solution, decode the structure, and then look at the testing hypotheses and the strict rules for falsification. Let's keep it moving. Section 1, the Phaistos Disk mystery. And really, it's been a century of dead ends. So for over 100 years, experts looking at this fired clay artifact basically just assumed it was a standard piece of writing, right? They thought, oh, it must be a storybook or a religious hymn, maybe a magic spell. They just assumed these symbols were trying to record spoken words, exactly like the alphabet we use every single day. But no matter how hard they tried to match these symbols to spoken sounds, nothing. The translations literally never made sense, just totally unstable results every single time. And here's why. There's a massive structural mismatch that's been holding us back. See, the old approach treats the disk like ordinary prose, like a flowing sentence in a novel. But actually, that fails because the disk physically doesn't behave like a book at all. The new hypothesis, well, we should treat it as a piece of procedural code. Think of it less like a poem and way more like a step-by-step instruction manual or a computer program. Which brings us to a huge paradigm shift. Researcher, inventor, and author Kevin L. Brown, as part of the Triune Harmonic Dynamics or THD research, puts it brilliantly. The Phaistos disk is not best modeled as a written sentence. It is best modeled as a stamped procedural spiral used to encode ordered operations. I mean, that hits the nail right on the head. Brown's research is basically arguing that we shouldn't be trying to pronounce this disk, we should be trying to execute its instructions. Let's jump right into Section 2, the mechanics of the disk. How does this procedural code solution actually work? Well, the physical evidence is honestly pretty hard to argue with. First off, the signs are stamped, not handwritten. Someone actually went through the incredible trouble of making a fixed set of reusable stamps just for these symbols. And think about it. If you're just writing a quick story, stamping every single letter is unbelievably slow and rigid. It just doesn't make sense. Second, the symbols are grouped into these strict little boxes, or cells rather, than flowing lines. And third, the whole thing is arranged in a spiral. Now, a spiral is a terrible shape for comfortable reading, but it's an absolutely amazing shape if you want to strictly control the order of a process, from start to finish. We can define this perfectly with a term straight from Kevin L. Brown's THD research, a procedural compression solution. So keeping it simple, think of it kind of like the instruction manual that comes with flat-pack furniture. You know, it doesn't use flowing sentences, it uses standardized symbols, little arrows and boxes to show you exactly what action to take and in what specific order. The sequence and the grouping are what give it meaning, not how you pronounce the symbols. All right, Section 3, decoding the structure. Let's look at the actual layers and roles here. Meaning on the disk doesn't just come from one isolated symbol, it comes from the interaction of a 3-layer system. You've got the spiral layer, which dictates the sequence and execution order, basically saying, move from here to there. Then the symbol layer, which tells you the specific function or tool. And finally, the cell layer, those little boxes drawn around the symbols, which tells you which operations are grouped together into a single step. You literally have to read all 3 layers at once to get the code. And zooming in on those little boxes or cells, the symbols have highly specific jobs depending on exactly where they sit. It's just like how a line of modern code has headers, core actions, and closures. So initial signs sit at the front and act as headers. Core signs are right there in the middle representing the main action. Modifier signs step in to change a state or quantity. And terminal signs sit at the very end to say, okay, this step is totally complete, time to move to the next phase. That explains perfectly why certain symbols almost always show up at the very end of a box. Normal language just doesn't work like that, but a structured process absolutely does. So suddenly, the physical constraints of the artifact make complete sense. The spiral controls the movement. The stamps ensure every single symbol is standardized and repeatable, so no misinterpreting messy handwriting. And the fact that we've only ever found one Phaistos disk, that used to really confuse people. But if this is a specialized master copy, like say a central instruction disk for a calendar or a major operation, You wouldn't need 1,000 copies. You literally just need one perfect, standardized master. Moving into Section 4, testing the hypothesis. Let's talk about the protocol. Because, look, in science and data analysis, a theory is only as good as its testability. We can't just be guessing. To test this independently, we use the field test protocol from the THD research. Step 1, segment the disk according to those spiral cell boundaries, not by assumed words. Step 2, classify every sign based on its positional role in the box, initial, medial, or terminal. Step 3, use the data to see if those repeated symbols are mathematically consistent in their positions. We're treating this thing like a logic puzzle, entirely removing the bias of trying to guess ancient spoken words. And finally, Section 5, falsification and confirmation, the proof. Any real scientific hypothesis has to be falsifiable, right? Kevin L. Brown's research is super transparent about this. If someone comes along tomorrow and cleanly translates the disk into ordinary spoken phonetic sentences, like if a conventional reading explains the whole thing simply, then this procedural hypothesis just fails. Done. Also, if the data shows that the position of a symbol inside a cell doesn't actually affect what it does, well, then the sequence model falls apart. It's an incredibly strict standard. But on the flip side, we have the confirmation conditions. The model gains massive credibility through repeatable structural prediction. If we see that a symbol's position reliably predicts its job, boom, the sequence model is strengthened. If those terminal symbols consistently behave exactly like completion markers, the execution model is strengthened. We are looking for hard structural math here, not speculative translation. Now, I want to be super clear about what this research does not claim. It doesn't claim that the Phaistos disk is 100% fully deciphered right this second. And it definitely doesn't claim that the symbols had absolutely no spoken sound tied to them whatsoever. But what it firmly establishes is that the disk has to be modeled first and foremost as a structured procedural spiral. It's an operational tool first and a phonetic inscription second. Which honestly leaves us with such an incredibly exciting question. We finally have the rulebook. We know the constraints, the positional logic, the layered structure. So if we feed this exact procedural framework into modern artificial intelligence, literally telling the AI, hey, stop treating this like a storybook and start treating it like standardized code, will AI be the one to finally execute the operations of the Phaistos disk? I mean, what a thrilling thought. We've shifted from guessing ancient syllables to literally unlocking ancient software. I really hope this structured look has completely changed how you view this amazing artifact. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.